Hi and welcome to AskSCW here on SCW on YouTube.com. Thank you for choosing the channel and choosing the video. Please subscribe right now. Leave in the comments in the comments section. Please like and share the video as well. It's time to have your say because it's time for the Q&A, answering your questions in the wrestling community. If you want to be involved here on AskSCW, drop a question here in the comments on YouTube, or you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. All should be coming out on your screen right about now. Leave a question with the hashtag AskSCW and I know to answer your question and give you a shout out in the next video. Plenty of topics to discuss today. WWE, of course, lots going on going into the Royal Rumble. Of course, we've got two major championship matches we're going to discuss, as well as the Royal Rumble match, even looking as far ahead as WrestleMania. And don't forget as well, we will be touching on other companies like Impact, AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling, the situation with Jay White. So plenty to stick around for. Let's get our first question now this week, coming from Know the Ropes podcast. And they ask, do you believe they'll have Goldberg beat Drew McIntyre? Well, we know what I hope. Let's say that straight off the bat, I hope Drew McIntyre retains the championship. I do not want to see Goldberg as champion in 2021. I'm one of those people on that side of the fence. I don't need to see it. We've seen Goldberg do this 20 odd years ago, being champion. We don't need to see it at this point of the game. Drew McIntyre is a genuine star that has been built, particularly in the last year. So much good work has been done into building him up. For me, it would be damaging at this point for him to lose the championship to Goldberg, especially with the way that this feud has been thrown together. It seems to be very last minute, completely out of nowhere. We thought the direction for the Rumble would be something like Sheamus. It's been building nicely over a number of weeks. We've even had potential where perhaps Braun Strowman, who was meant to be the challenger at TLC, could have returned. Maybe we could have built something towards that. We could have even had something with The Miz now he has the Money in the Bank contract back. But no, we've got Goldberg instead, which arguably is a big match. I mean, Goldberg was in a championship match at last year's WrestleMania. If Goldberg loses, I'm perfectly fine with the match. It's not a WrestleMania. The Royal Rumble is a good place to have it. You don't want long, lengthy matches in between these Rumble matches. We've got two Royal Rumble matches which are going to be an hour each already on the pay-per-view. We need to avoid the Royal Rumble being a 5-hour event. So in one way, this match is not going to go longer than 5 minutes. So I'm fine with that. If Drew McIntyre wins, I'm fine with it. The problem we've got here is that Raw is doing disastrously in the ratings. And I think this is what it comes down to. If Goldberg comes back now like he has and the ratings went up for Legends Night, if they continue to be up going into the Rumble, WWE may look at things and say, well, hang on, Drew isn't pulling the numbers in, let's give it to Goldberg, and Goldberg could win the championship at the Royal Rumble. So right now, I sit on hope and say no. Will it happen? I think we're going to have a good idea in the next couple of weeks what will happen. But of course, Goldberg has 2 matches a year. So if Goldberg is going to win the championship here, we know already he'll be losing it in the match after. Austin Whitley with our next question now. And if Goldberg beats Drew, which in his opinion is highly likely, what's the story going forward? Well, it's establishing, as I said in the last question, the story now going into the Rumble. It was a very muddled way it was put together. I mean, of course, there was timing issues on Raw, which meant that Drew didn't have time to cut a promo that he was going to do after defeating Keith Lee, which was meant to lead to Goldberg coming out and making this match, which Goldberg still cut the same promo, which Drew hadn't done, which made him look quite, well, senile, to be brutally honest. It made Goldberg come off as a heel when he's supposed to come off as a superhero to the kids. That's kind of what Goldberg wanted coming back when he made his return in 2016. So this seems to be still built around respect. It just seems that it's been done about respect in a very weird way at this point. I'm hoping that it's still built around respect, but I kind of hope that WWE kind of just drops what happened last week and just goes with the simple respect of the legend. And if you want to be seen as someone who, you know, is respected by the legends, that you have to be someone that is willing to beat one of us that's, you know, still able to go to get that full respect. I think that's probably the best way they can do the story at this point. But Drew already has the respect of everybody else. Hulk Hogan was in the back as well. It made so much sense for Goldberg's promo to be cut on someone like Randy Orton, who had been terrorizing Legends the whole Legends night on Raw. So in one way, it doesn't make sense. And in another way, I'm going to say this, I would have preferred to have seen Goldberg against Randy Orton, mainly because Goldberg is always involved in championship matches. Where I think Goldberg could be utilised better is in matches that establish other people. Randy Orton doesn't need the rub at this point, but if you want to continue with this Legend Killer gimmick, I think that would have worked better. But to go back to your question, if Goldberg does win the championship, and I think that's depending at this point, I'm not so sold on it. He will lose the rematch, and I think there will be a rematch at WrestleMania, and I think it will be, again, built on respect, and it'll be that point of, can Drew beat the legend? Is Drew good enough? Is perhaps today's level good enough to yesterday's level? Maybe that's the story that they could build on, and maybe that's something they could push so that the audience at home go, hang on, you know, the casual ones, and the hardcore ones are ready for these new stars to be built, but maybe the casual people at home need to be told, look, you rely on people like Goldberg to have your interest coming in, but maybe you need to start believing in the stars we've got today. So if Goldberg wins that belt, initially it takes that away, but maybe in the long term, when Drew gets that belt back from Goldberg at WrestleMania, maybe at that point you can start saying, look, this is Drew McIntyre. He beat Brock last year, he beat Goldberg this year. This is Drew McIntyre. He has been the champion for most of the last 12 months. This is the guy that we should be believing in. And maybe that's WWE's weird logic of trying to get people to be invested in the current stars in the current product. Next question comes from Mike at Tanhabs Mike, and he's got two questions for us this week. He's asking my thoughts on Roman Reigns versus Adam Pearce at the Royal Rumble, and do I think that that match leads to someone being involved that leads to Reigns facing that person at WrestleMania 37? And in my opinion, what is the best Royal Rumble singles or tag matches ever? Well, I'm going to tackle that question first, as we've got a number of Adam Pearce and Roman Reigns questions coming up, so I'm going to tackle that second to keep everything together. But for Royal Rumble matches, for singles and tag, I've got a number in mind, and I'll come to a conclusion in what I think is the best. For a tag team, first one off the bat comes to Royal Rumble 2000. The tables match between the Dudleys and the Hardy Boys is the real standout tag team match, in my personal opinion, when you look back throughout the Rumble history. In singles matches, there's quite a few that stand out, particularly for me. I mean, we're talking about Royal Rumble 2000. What about Triple H against Cactus Jack? That sort of hardcore environment match between those two. I believe it was No Holds Barred. Was an epic encounter at the Rumble. I particularly enjoyed as well from the Royal Rumble 2003, Kurt Angle against Chris Benoit, a technical masterclass that was at the time, and really showed the strength of SmackDown of what they had. As well as that, up-to-date matches, 2017 Royal Rumble is one of my favourite matches that didn't include the Rumble match itself, particularly the match with Kevin Owens and Roman Reigns. Again, all the toys came up to play for that Universal Championship match, and as well as that, the match between John Cena and AJ Styles, the 5-star match, of course, that took place at the Rumble for the WWE Championship. So there are a number of contenders that come under that category. For me, to pick one, it's very, very difficult. I'm torn between Triple H and Cactus Jack and John Cena and AJ Styles. Those two, for me, are the real standouts. For the nostalgia in me, the one that likes to have the throwbacks, I will go with Triple H and Cactus Jack. But personally, I think John Cena and AJ Styles was an epic encounter between those two. Of all the matches they had, and they were really good matches, always between Cena and Styles, that one for me really was the top of the bunch. I really, really enjoyed that. As for Roman Reigns and Adam Pearce, some people may be completely against this idea of storyline. For me, I can understand totally why, especially the fact Adam Pearce was getting people suspended, like Braun Strowman, for having someone put their hands on him just a number of weeks ago. All of a sudden, he's in a match for the Universal Championship at the Royal Rumble. But I do think this could be an absolute stroke of genius. It really shows into the power play. Who is calling the shots on SmackDown? Is it Authority or is it Roman Reigns? And I really like the way that the storyline is playing out. And again, as I mentioned earlier in the video, this is not going to be your 20-30 minute match in Ring Classic. It's going to be Roman Reigns against someone who effectively can't compete. This is going to be angle more than match, and I think so far with Roman Reigns since his return, especially with those matches with Jey Uso, you look at the angles and stories in those matches have really taken Roman Reigns to another level. So I do believe that this has the potential to go that sort of route, and I think it's going to be a fantastic spectacle to watch. The thing you've said there, could it involve someone else to come in and defend, and that way it leads to a match at WrestleMania? It certainly could. We've got a number of contenders that could be involved with that. Kevin Owens is the most obvious. He's still involved in this storyline with Roman Reigns, and of course it would even up the odds. Shinsuke Nakamura now, of course, was the journeyman in the most recent match that we had here with the Gauntlet match. And of course, Shinsuke should have been the one taking on Roman at the Rumble. Perhaps Shinsuke will get a championship match between now and WrestleMania. We'll have to wait and see. So that certainly could be an option as well. A full-on face turn for Shinsuke. Certainly wouldn't be against it at this stage. I'll be quite honest, because Shinsuke, he's been a heel now for around 2 years, and he's kind of got lost for, I would say, at least 18 months of that time. So I wouldn't be against Shinsuke going back to being a babyface now, particularly being pushed up the card as well. There definitely is a hole, it feels, on the babyface side on SmackDown. But your last one for me is Daniel Bryan. And of course, Daniel Bryan is rumoured right now to be the opponent for Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 37. And if that's the case, it's a great way to build things in. Daniel Bryan, of course, is a former GM, of course, on SmackDown. So he knows what it's like to be in that role. And of course, that sympathy act you could have there for Adam Pearce, it could kind of work. Adam Pearce has worked the Indies, so has Daniel Bryan. So there's lots of different potentials. It could lead to that, yes. We'll have to wait and see what it would lead to. I think of those, the favourite would be Kevin Owens. But what I would say to that is that if it is Kevin Owens, that wouldn't lead to the WrestleMania match. That would lead to your next pay-per-view, which would more likely be the Elimination Chamber, which also is quite exciting as well, because with the Elimination Chamber, if that is the next pay-per-view, maybe we might find Roman in the chamber with a number of enemies in one match, and that certainly would be fascinating to see as well. The fact that all those storylines building together could lead to that chamber structure. Next question coming from Dylan Ketchum asking, do you think Kevin Owens is going to return at the SmackDown before the Rumble to face Reigns instead of Adam Pearce? Well, here's another thing you say. I mean, that makes so much sense there, because Adam Pearce, there was a lot of stroke to put him in the match. He could have just taken himself out of it. He's been making matches for months. He didn't necessarily have to be out there involved in the first place to be involved in that match. And now he's won it. He simply still has the authority, surely, to take himself out of the match. And Kevin Owens going in would make a lot of sense. But as I said earlier on here, I think Roman Reigns works very well in these storyline environments. So I think this match is going to go ahead. I do think, though, that Kevin Owens will come back. And I do think he will more than likely even the odds here, or try and put some sort of favour in there for Adam Pearce. Maybe Roman actually uses his authority and his influence to try and actually make Adam Pearce make this a special gimmick match. Maybe it becomes no holds barred or something, and that way Adam Pearce is walking in, think he's going to get absolutely annihilated. Instead, he's got Kevin Owens, by his side there, returning at the Rumble or just before the Rumble to even up the odds. And of course, we've got Jey Uso who's there as well. It could make a fun twist. I think it's going to be, like I said, more angle than storyline. I'm very much looking forward to it. Vigilante with our next question now here on AskSCW. And again, we're going back to Adam Pearce. What a great, badass wrestler 6 years ago in the independent wrestling. Now he's making a return. What are your views? And of course, makes other references to Nakamura, Shinsuke, face turn, loving his performance on SmackDown. You're not alone on that one. And SmackDown giving the opportunity to everyone. Biggie, Carmella, Ziggler, Rude, Kevin Owens, and more. Yeah, absolutely. We'll finish on Adam Pearce first here. And I have to say, he sold that super kick better than half of the roster. He literally looked like he'd been annihilated by Jey Uso. It was perfectly done. And I do think Adam Pearce, they did say outright that they said he wasn't good enough for WWE, but this has given him his moment in WWE. He's getting a match here on a marquee pay-per-view. This almost feels like you've done so well on the independents and you're doing a great role on TV. Let's give you something to remember this by, and let's have you in a match, and it could work really well in the storyline. I really think it's playing out very, very nicely. And like you say, that he was a badass on the independent scene. If I'm not mistaken, a former NWA champion. And of course, he did have his final match in Ring of Honor in 2014 as well. So it's been a long time he's been out of the ring. But I'm interested to see what it's going to be like with him in the ring. And I do think he's selling, if he sells that super kick that well, the storyline angle with things with Roman Reigns can be done so well. At the moment, I can't believe I'm saying it, but I'm really looking forward to this match. I think it's been very well put together. We mentioned Shinsuke Nakamura. Yeah, I put a great performance in the Gauntlet match. It definitely took me by surprise. I expected Rey Mysterio or Daniel Bryan to be the journeyman in that Gauntlet match. I didn't expect it to be Nakamura. There were definite signs of a babyface turn there, especially with the handshake that we had there as well with Daniel Bryan. The fact as well that kind of had a babyface run, beating the likes of King Corbin as well. There's definitely scope, and we've got a match with Nakamura and Jey Uso next week on SmackDown. It does feel like the face turn is on, which will be very interesting what that would lead with the tag team partnership with him and Cesaro. Perhaps they will actually lead that further into storyline going further down the line. But you mentioned it, SmackDown is the land of opportunity once again now on Friday nights. It feels that with the influence of Daniel Bryan perhaps on creative, it's sort of gone back to that 2016 twist there. I do think that the match with Robert Roode and Dolph Ziggler becoming the tag team champions this past week, that match with the Street Profits was absolutely fantastic. It was beyond anything I expected. I thought that these two had great chemistry of teams in the ring. They have had little spurts of matches before, which I've been a little bit underwhelmed by. This match really sold it for me. I was really into it, and I think that it was good to see we had new champions as well. I think that the time was right to switch those belts. I do think the Profits will win them back because there's not many teams to really go along with on SmackDown, but for what it was on SmackDown, I thought that this was a pay-per-view quality level match here, and it's good to see that Ziggler and Roode are not being treated like jobbers. They have got the championships. Carmella has done a great job as well. Her match with Sasha Banks, of course, at TLC was absolutely fantastic. Digging her new character as well, and you mentioned Big E as well there. I mean, the Intercontinental Champion, doing very well so far. I'm hoping it's going to be a big year for Big E in 2021. I made some big predictions on this channel for him so far, so I really hope that that does carry through. And we mentioned Kevin Owens as well there. Yep, it's great to see him back in the championship picture. He's had some good matches with Roman Reigns. I do fear for him what happens after this program with Reigns, because Kevin Owens, in my opinion, has not been the best booked in WWE, certainly in the last 4 years since that defeat to Goldberg, which we mentioned at the top of the show here, mentioned with Goldberg and Drew McIntyre. I don't want to see that happen to Drew of what has happened to Kevin Owens, because Kevin Owens was definitely literally on the roll there to becoming a main eventer at that time, and literally it felt like the rug was pulled beneath him. But this is definitely the closest we've got to KO being back to the KO that we remember pre that time as we do right now. So I do hope that KO can continue with that momentum past this rivalry with Roman Reigns. Slam Hub Wrestling of our next question now here on AskSCW, and going back to Shinsuke Nakamura. After a really strong performance in the Gauntlet match, is there a chance Nakamura gets a career resurgence in WWE? I think so. I really, really do. I think WWE are kind of aware that SmackDown is a bit thin on the babyface side, and I think they kind of think, well, we need someone to fill that void. Is it someone that's going to come up from NXT? Of course, there was rumours that Damian Priest was going to come up, but that seems to be a nixed, certainly for now anyway. They probably looked on the roster and thought that the best bet was Shinsuke Nakamura because of the fact that with his original music, he was so over, he's great in the ring, and they do have so many stars on SmackDown that you could argue being underutilized. And Nakamura has been in a WrestleMania Championship match. They probably thought, this is the guy that we're going to do. It was either him, or in my opinion, Seth Rollins could have been the other guy, but the Messiah gimmick has worked fairly well overall, and I think perhaps maybe they have some ideas of what they're going to do with Seth when he comes back, particularly the way he was written off a Survivor Series. So for that reason, I think Nakamura is the right guy going forward. He's got a match with Jey Uso, main event Uso, next week on SmackDown, so I think that probably will be the main event next week, looking when we go to SmackDown this Friday evening. And I do think that Nakamura, as I said in a previous question, I wouldn't be surprised if Nakamura gets a championship match on pay-per-view leading up between now and WrestleMania. Who knows, if he's booked that well and he wins the Royal Rumble this year, maybe he is the guy at WrestleMania, and we'll touch on that in the next question. Noob and Co with a number of questions for us now here on AskSCW. I'm going to split up them into two here for you. Go with the first three for you now. Do you think Nakamura will be the right person to beat Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 37? Which brand will Damian Priest and Rhea Ripley join? And what do I think of Sonya Deville's new role in WWE as an authority figure? Let's finish on Shinsuke Nakamura because we've had a number of Nakamura questions. I wouldn't be surprised if it did lead that way. If he won the Royal Rumble and he went to WrestleMania, it would be great to really have Shinsuke as what we knew the potential we could get. The problem Shinsuke has as being the person being right there to defeat Roman Reigns is the promo side. Nakamura needs a manager, needs to be better with, conveying his message. He can speak English, but not always does it translate well over the camera, and I think that that's what WWE really struggle with. The fact that Nakamura at times you think could be almost like a silent assassin. That gimmick could work really well for him as well, but I think WWE likes to have that sports entertainer. They like to have the guy that can do the promo, carrying stuff. So I don't think Nakamura is going to be the right guy that would defeat Roman Reigns, but certainly I wouldn't be against the idea of Nakamura being in the position to take on Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 37. As for Damian Priest and Rhea Ripley, well, I mean, looking at it, I would say that one will go on each brand if it was me. Damian Priest, I would put on SmackDown. We said that the face side is lacking a little bit. I think Priest would be really good for that role on SmackDown. And as for Monday Night Raw, I think they could do with Rhea Ripley. I think right now, Raw feels like that they have a load of talented women, but the problem is they're not being utilised. They're not being booked correctly. So in theory, where you could say Rhea Ripley would be best suited on SmackDown, along with facing the likes of Sasha Banks and Bayley and superstars like this, I do think that they will put her on Raw because unfortunately they've got a lot of women on Raw, but I don't think they believe in these people in being in the championship picture, which is such a shame. But I think wherever Rhea Ripley goes, she will be a championship contender, and I've said already previously, I would not be surprised if she was to win the Royal Rumble for the women's match this year. As for Sonya Deville, well, this gets her on TV, doesn't it? It certainly gives her as well a chance to establish and getting her character more over. She done so well, with TV time when she was in a rivalry with Mandy Rose. Arguably, her promos and her work there is what really stood her out in that program. And I do think this will put her in with, higher level talent, and I think that it certainly is an interesting way to bring her back into storyline and storytelling. But I think long term, I think it can really work. I think that when she then comes away from this gimmick, goes back into the ring, maybe she goes into the ring when she's got an issue with the women's champion. I don't know. There's different ideas that you could do with it. I certainly think that the best thing you could have done perhaps for Sonya Deville, but maybe they don't want to go down this sort of avenue right now, would have been for her to come back at the Rumble. Big pop, big win. Everyone would be behind Sonya Deville after everything that has happened to her in the last sort of 6 to 8 months. But I think WWE wants to go a different idea with it, and I think it's a long-term strategy. And there's nothing wrong with long-term strategies. I love a long-term storyline, and if they're going to do this starting here, and it leads to something to where towards the turn of the year that Sonya Deville is back in the ring as one of the top contenders on SmackDown rather than arguably just another face, I don't see why we can't make a start of Sonya Deville using this as her platform. I'm happy to see how it's going to play out, but certainly it's different, it's exciting, it feels a bit fresh. It almost feels like we're going to the GM role because she's going to take the weight off the shoulders of Adam Pearce. So maybe after what's finished with him on SmackDown with Roman Reigns, and we're going back to that, maybe Adam Pearce has had enough of SmackDown. Maybe he goes to Raw, and maybe Sonya Deville becomes full GM of SmackDown. How would that work out? Few more questions then from Noob and Co. Who will turn heel the most, Asuka or Charlotte Flair? Who will be the next to face Io Shirai for the NXT Women's Championship? We've got 3 options in the question here: Raquel Gonzalez, Mercedes Martinez, or Toni Storm. And last but not least, what are your thoughts on the Dusty Women's Tag Team Classic? Right, Asuka or Charlotte Flair? Charlotte Flair. Charlotte needs to be the heel because Charlotte suits so much to be the heel. I think that it's okay as a babyface, but I feel that Charlotte, she's got so much more personality when she is a baddie, and I think that people don't like Charlotte Flair, they love to hate her, so it makes more sense for me to be her turning heel of the two here. I think that Charlotte Flair has come back to get into the Women's Championship picture, and she's used the Women's Tag Team Championships to do so. It's not great on the Women's Tag Team Championships, but it certainly at least gives them a place on TV at the moment. I do think that Charlotte Flair will turn heel on Asuka for those championships to then go to somebody else, perhaps maybe Nia Jax or Shayna Baszler. Maybe it could be the Dusty women's winners. We'll have to wait and see. Maybe that's an option of what could happen. But I think then, of course, that leads to Charlotte versus Asuka. Please, let's say that's not a WrestleMania, but maybe it could be. We'll have to wait and see. But I do think it will lead to before WrestleMania, if I'm honest. Maybe it could lead to both of them at WrestleMania and Rhea Ripley. Who knows? Maybe it could be a triple threat between the 3 of them. We're sort of throwing some ideas out there with the questions that we've got today. As well then, looking at the NXT Women's Championship, well, I wouldn't be surprised. NXT has not been, shy of making multi-person matches before. Perhaps it's a fatal 4-way because Mercedes Martinez is currently positioned, in my opinion, as the direct person that's going for that championship. She's the one attacking Io Shirai. Raquel Gonzalez is the one via merit. She's the one that's picking up the most victories. She did it in War Games, and she's effectively destroyed Rhea Ripley this past week on New Year's Evil. And Toni Storm, well, it's Toni Storm. I mean, she's certainly thrown her name in contention. I still think she needs a match with Ember Moon to solidify herself as a challenger. So for me, it's not quite yet, but I wouldn't be surprised to see if it was a multi-woman match. If I had to pick one right now, I think that the short-term answer is Mercedes Martinez. I think that the one that should be to win the championship should be Raquel Gonzalez, but that's just my point of view at this particular moment. And with the Dusty Women's Tag Team Classic, I think it's a great idea. I think it really does work. I think it can help establish more tag teams for the Women's Tag Team Championships. It's certainly a marquee thing as well that's done on NXT at the start of the year. It's done for the men. Why shouldn't it be done for the women? We definitely have some ideas of what potentially could be some great tag teams for the women in NXT. Of course, we've got the obvious one of Dakota Kai and Raquel Gonzalez. Arguably would have to be the favourites in this tournament and would be great for them to actually win that and establish themselves as challengers for the Women's Tag Team Championships. Maybe this will be a way to bring them back to NXT, and maybe it gives them an NXT tag team some exposure on the main roster. Maybe they get an opportunity to win the belts, and then they can go to Raw and SmackDown and then also defend them on NXT and do their own thing. As well as that, we've got The Way, Candice LeRae, as well as Indy Hartwell could be a team. We've got Katie Catanzaro and Kaden Carter as well. So we do have some teams there, and we'll probably have some thrown together teams as well, as we usually do. So it should be exciting. I'm really intrigued to see how it's going to play out. Maybe 8 teams or something, and yeah, it should be awesome. Maybe the finals of both of them will be at the next NXT TakeOver. That would be pretty exciting to see. Next question comes from Renier Porter. You get to book WrestleMania 37. What would be your card? I love this question, I must admit. I love to fantasy book, and I love the idea of WrestleMania season coming up that I could book the card. I certainly have put a card together. Let's have a look through it. I will try and explain as best as I can, and let's see if you guys like it as well. So I've put it up on your screen for you now. Of course, the first match I would do would be the WWE Championship. I would do Drew McIntyre as the champion. Of course, this is the point he's beaten Goldberg. He will be taking on The Fiend for the championship. And I do feel that The Fiend should remain heel. I'm not a fan of Bray turning babyface. I like the idea of heel. Both of these guys had monumental victories at last year's WrestleMania. So for me, this makes a worthy main event. Of course, Drew McIntyre beating Brock Lesnar last year. And of course, The Fiend destroying John Cena in that sort of match storyline angle thing that went on with the Fly 5 Funhouse match. I think these two in the championship match definitely feels important. For that time, you bring those casual viewers in as well. It's a great thing for them to turn around and see, look, we've got two guys that won at last year's Mania that, you know, it's not, you know, your Goldbergs, your Lesnars, your Undertakers. You know, we've got these two guys here. This is the future. These are the guys that are the big guys on the card, and we should be looking out for them every year. Of course, we've got our hardcore demographic who wants to see people pushed and stuff like that, but also you have to think about that casual environment, and we have to start thinking about the future for WrestleMania. Who are your big stars in the company? And I think these two are the biggest that we have on Raw. I think it's the biggest match you could make on the Raw side for WrestleMania. So for me, Drew McIntyre versus The Fiend would be one of them. The Universal Championship match, and this has got a unique twist. I would have Roman Reigns defending against your men's Royal Rumble winner, Keith Lee. That's how I would book it. I said the SmackDown side is lacking baby faces. Keith Lee, for me, either has to... It feels like he's the third babyface on Raw, so either is he going to go heel and join the Hurt Business, as many people predict, or maybe he wins the Rumble and instead of going for Drew, he goes for Roman on SmackDown. He fits nicely in that main event scene. I'd like to see it. I think these two, they had an epic showdown at Survivor Series a couple of years ago. I think 2019 it was. I think these two in a WrestleMania match, I think would be awesome. So that for me is something I would like to see play out. For the SmackDown Women's Championship, I would have Sasha Banks in a triple threat match against Bianca Belair and Bayley. I think Bianca is a potential Royal Rumble winner, but of course I think she could get there in that match on merit. The fact that her and Bayley have a feud going on anyway, it gets Bayley on the WrestleMania card also, which I think is very important. I think that this would be an awesome triple threat match between these three ladies. Personally, it also positions nicely Bianca into that WrestleMania spot as well. When you've got the experience around her, Bayley and Sasha, I think that this would be a best way to book this triple threat match. On the Raw Women's side, we've got a complete change around here. We've got the Raw Women's Champion, Charlotte Flair. Yes, you're right, I've booked her as champion once again. She has turned heel on Asuka, and then she's won the championship going in to WrestleMania against who I would have as the Women's Royal Rumble winner, an NXT superstar winning the Royal Rumble for the first time, Rhea Ripley. It would be a repeat of last year's WrestleMania match for the NXT Women's Championship. This time, Rhea Ripley would become the champion. She would get the victory over Charlotte Flair. It's meant to be at the Raymond James Stadium, if they can do that again this year. Rhea Ripley was supposed to have that moment last year. She got it taken away from her. It was in the PC. She is supposed to have a big WrestleMania match, and I think that to do that this year with the Raw Women's Championship would be the right way to go, in my opinion. But that's not to say that I've not got a big match in line for Asuka. I have Asuka down to take on Alexa Bliss, the two most interesting gimmicks on Raw right now, in my opinion, the women's division. You can have a lot of fun with the new Alexa Bliss gimmick here, having a feud with Asuka as well, of course, with her craziness, with her green mist as well. I think they can have a lot of fun with these two in a feud together. And the reason I put this here is because, I mean, if I was to have a first choice, Bliss could always assist The Fiend in his feud with Drew McIntyre. I would love to see Asuka against Ronda Rousey. Of course, Ronda Rousey does have, her contract expiring with WWE after WrestleMania 37. So if she was to come back in, one marquee match I would love to see would be Asuka against Ronda Rousey. But I can't book it because of the fact that we've not seen Ronda in 2 years. So I feel, even though it's a match that, if you ask me if I could put it together and would book, yeah, it would be my top choice. I can't book someone that I don't think necessarily is going to be on the show, which is why I've not really gone for those outsiders coming in. I've not gone for The Rock. I've not gone for John Cena. Arguably you could turn around and say John Cena would be a great match for Roman Reigns, because it's probably still the biggest match WWE could do, outside of The Rock if he was to come in from Hollywood. Cena could easily go for that 17th world title. Roman Reigns, of course, is the head of the table. They could easily make that storyline really, really good. But because of the fact I can't rely on those people coming in, I haven't booked them. But I say I haven't booked them. One that was at last year's WrestleMania has been heavily linked to this year's WrestleMania, though, is Brock Lesnar. And I do think he will come back. I don't think he's done with WWE just yet. So even though I've said I've not done it with most of them, I have done it with Brock, because Brock has been around the most recent of all of those other names mentioned, with the exception of John Cena, of course. But here's the other thing with John Cena. I'm just going to say very quickly, John Cena was annihilated and written off TV by the Firefly Funhouse match with The Fiend last year. I just think it would be fun if Cena also could sell it for a year. I think that would be quite good if he wasn't around at WrestleMania, because then that way people would say, well, that happened at last year's WrestleMania, Cena comes back and he's in that top position this year. For me, that wouldn't kind of work. It kind of would be like, well, what was the point of that angle last year? It would be more fun if Cena sold it and missed a WrestleMania. So for that reason, that's another reason why I wouldn't do it. But Brock Lesnar, I want to see him against Bobby Lashley. For me, it's a dream match that I want to see. So I would book that for WrestleMania this year if I could make that happen. Lashley may still be United States Champion at this point. I've not booked a United States Championship match on this card because Lashley is that dominant. I think if he was to have a match with Lesnar, he shouldn't lose the championship in a one-on-one encounter between now and then. He's not really lost a lot. He's lost once since June, and that was this past week on Raw. I don't think he should lose again, and I would book him then in that match with Lesnar at WrestleMania. Dream match environment time once again as well. A triple threat match here for you. A match that I just would love to see at WrestleMania. AJ Styles against Daniel Bryan against Seth Rollins. And the way that I would book this match, I would have the classic showcase Raw versus SmackDown match that we used to get in the WrestleMania 20s sort of matches. Certainly was very popular between, I think it was like 2005 and 2008, 9 sort of area. That we'd always get a Raw versus SmackDown superstar on the card. AJ Styles would be the representative on Raw, but we couldn't decide who it would be on SmackDown between Daniel Bryan and Seth Rollins. They would have a natural feud going on the show, and AJ Styles would be, look, I can take you both on, I can beat both of you. AJ is sort of half-turning babyface, it feels, in recent weeks on Raw anyway. He's got his big bodyguard by his, watching his back. He thinks he can take out anybody. It doesn't matter who he does take on. So for me, this would be a triple threat match, and this would be the longest match of the night. I think that it would be pretty epic to see these guys go against each other. I Quit match, Edge versus Randy Orton. Self-explanatory, really. Edge needs his revenge. If we can get some fans in attendance, this is how it's supposed to be last year with Edge and Orton. I would book that once again. Other matches I would go for, I'd go for the Intercontinental Championship. I'd have Big E, of course, still the champion, defending against Jey Uso. Both have been breakout stars in the last 12 months, or certainly last 6 months or so. I think that these two against each other for the IC title would be very good at WrestleMania. I would particularly like to see it. I'd have Kevin Owens against Sami Zayn. Now, I know people have seen this match, it seems, a million times over the years, but a WrestleMania match, it feels it's the last place left for this feud to go over the years. So KO versus Sami, I would have at WrestleMania. And plus, I don't think we've had so many with KO as the face and Sami as the heel. I certainly think it should be a match that should be culminated at a WrestleMania 1 year. And I think that this is the perfect year to do it. They're both on the same show on SmackDown. It feels like it would be the right time to pull that trigger, in my opinion. For those Nakamura fans that are saying, where's Nakamura on this card? I would have a surprising build for this, but I would have Nakamura against Cesaro, and here's the way that I would book it. Cesaro would be the journeyman in the Royal Rumble this year. We're not just going to build up Shinsuke Nakamura after that gauntlet match. We're going to build up Cesaro as well, and we're going to make these two have a showcase match at WrestleMania. It'd be the point where Cesaro is on Nakamura's side for a long time. Nakamura gets a championship opportunity, perhaps at the pay-per-view before WrestleMania, which is either the Elimination Chamber, Fastlane, whatever show they put there together, and Cesaro costs him that opportunity, so it builds and makes the match for them two at WrestleMania. As a hard-hitting match, Sheamus versus Braun Strowman. I need to get both of these guys on the card. I think it'd be quite fun to see them face each other, so that personally would be my preference of putting them two in a match against one another. For the Tag Team Championship matches then, just to round things off, we've got the Raw Tag Team Championships. I'd have a Fatal 4-Way. I'd have the Hurt Business, the New Day, Miz and Morrison, along with the Hardy Bros, of course, Jeff Hardy and Matt Riddle. Just Riddle these days, but still, I'm going to call him Matt Riddle, damn it. For the SmackDown ones, we've got the Street Profits. They'll win the championships back because, well, why wouldn't they? There's not many teams for Rude and Ziggler to face, and they will be taking on Rey Mysterio and Dominic Mysterio. We're finally going to get the father-son win those tag team championships at WrestleMania, because I think that certainly would be a nice WrestleMania moment. Would be big for the Mysterios, and I'd like to see it personally. I think that certainly would be something I'd like to see go down. Women's Tag Team Championships, I've gone for here a number of teams here in the environment. I've gone for 4 teams. I've gone for Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler, as of course they've held the belts for a long time. They lost them at TLC, but well, someone needs to win them back off of Charlotte Flair and Asuka, so they'll be the team that I will nominate to do so. We're going to have Mandy Rose and Dana Brooke. We've got the Riot Squad, and we're going to have the winners of the Dusty Women's Tag Team Classic, because they are a tag team and they would be great to be in that position at WrestleMania. So for this, if I had to pick a team right now, I would go Raquel Gonzalez and Dakota Kai. I think they would be the most established tag team that could do so at WrestleMania. Last but not least then, let's go for the kickoff matches, and of course we're going to have the Battle Royales back, because now it doesn't matter, we can have the Battle Royals. We have one at Survivor Series. I don't see why we can't have a 12 to 15, 16 person for the men and for the women, so I would do that on both kickoffs. Last but not least as well, I would say that of course WrestleMania this year, the biggest thing there, so many matches, it has to be a 2-night event. Once again, is what I would do. I'd put it on 2 nights, that way the show doesn't seem like it's a 7-hour show. It would be better, and I think it was better presented over 2 nights. So for me, I want to see WrestleMania 37 on both the Saturday and the Sunday. But that's my fantasy booked WrestleMania 37 card. Let me know your card in the comments below. Definitely interested to see if people like the idea of that card as well. Definitely would love some feedback on what you think of that WrestleMania card as well. Dan the Man Williams for our next question now here in AskSCW. Who do you think will be a surprise return in the Royal Rumble? Well, funny you do that. I'm going to have a video coming up this week with 10 potential superstars that I think could be returning surprise entrants in both the men and women's matches. I will give a couple away for you on this video. In fact, I'm going to give one that's not going to be in that video, judging on storytelling this past week. And that first one will be The Big Show, because, well, he reckons he can go at any time against Randy Orton. Randy Orton at the moment is supposed to be in the Royal Rumble match. The Big Show against Randy Orton for a segment in the Rumble. I wouldn't be surprised if that was to go down. So for me, that would be a logical idea of what you could do there. 2 others that I will make mention to you right now on this video, and I will save the rest for when I drop that video, but I will give you a shout out when that video goes public as well. One, Rhea Ripley. I've said it already. I think she should win the Women's Royal Rumble. I would like to see her come in. I think that would be a great surprise, because then she wouldn't just be coming in as an NXT superstar. She would be a full-time established member of either Raw or SmackDown going forward. And another name that we mentioned earlier in this video to round things off would be Damian Priest, someone else who has been rumoured to be coming up to SmackDown in the very near future. So for me, I would have Damian Priest as a potential idea that could be a surprise in the Royal Rumble. So yeah, there's a couple of ideas there. We've got a legend there, we've got 2 from NXT, but I will save the rest for you for when we do that video, which should be dropping in the next 24 hours or so. Ladarius Brown with our next question now. Thank you for your question. Who is next in line to challenge Sasha Banks for the SmackDown Women's title? Great question, this one. It feels at the moment, judging by SmackDown, Carmella has still got a lot to say on the subject. It feels that she's not let go of what's going on with Sasha Banks. She did pick up a victory as well over Sasha recently in a tag team match on SmackDown as well, which involved Bianca Belair and Bayley as well. I wouldn't be surprised if there was another match between these two at the Royal Rumble. So Carmella for me is my answer for you here today. But I do think long term, I do see Bianca Belair as the definite challenger for Sasha Banks. I wouldn't be surprised if Bayley will still be in and around the mix as well, like I've done for the booked fancy WrestleMania 37 card that I did just a question or so ago. So yeah, for me, I think that Carmella right now is probably the short-term answer. Long-term, definitely see Bianca. But next in line for me, I would say Royal Rumble definitely is going to be Carmella. Jamie, the controversial one, Holmes, with a very controversial topic right now in the wrestling community. Like me, do you think Jay White leaving New Japan Pro Wrestling is a work? Tomohiro Ishii wouldn't call him out for a match for no good reason. Judging by the evidence of what we've seen, I have to agree with you. I would love to see Jay White in NXT or AEW, and I know that a lot of people will disagree with me for saying that, but I'm a casual New Japan fan. I think Jay White is an exceptional talent. I don't have the opportunity to watch his work as often as I would like to. Therefore, for me, that selfish reason would like to see him come to NXT or AEW. But I do think that this is a work. I think it's a carefully planned out storyline, I should say, that I think is going to go for the duration of, certainly the next few months in New Japan Pro Wrestling. And I think that when Jay White does come back, it feels like it's going to be a more psychotic version of the Switchblade than we've had previously. Definitely feels like he's trolling people at this particular moment. But looking at that press conference after Wrestle Kingdom 15, it was very Mick Foley-esque, that promo, or that, that interview that he was cutting for us. It certainly did hit home. I think it was very good work from Jay White. Like I say, he's an exceptional talent. Any company in the world should want his services if he is available. But one thing that does support this argument as well, suggesting that this is a work more than not, like you say, that challenge wouldn't be put out for no reason. And also, Dave Meltzer, if you do follow the Wrestling Observer, he says he's not been in contact with New Japan. He's not been in contact with Jay White personally, but for when they did speak of when AEW were going to start a couple of years ago, they did initially have conversations with Jay White. They wanted him on board, and Jay White did say to them at that time that he had just signed a 7-year contract with New Japan Pro Wrestling. So via the math, that's 2 down. He's got 5 to go. So unless he's unhappy, maybe he's reached an agreement to leave the company for whatever reason, fair enough. But for me, I'd say it's more than likely he is staying in New Japan Pro Wrestling. I don't see him going anywhere at this particular moment. Mark Q World Order with our next question now. And after an early match of the year contender at Genesis, do you think that Impact Wrestling needs to find a way to put the world title on Moose as soon as possible, or they continue to hold it off and use him outside the world title picture? And a bonus question, should Moose eventually face Kenny Omega and put him on an entirely new level if that happens? In my opinion, Moose is the guy that should be the world champion in Impact Wrestling if we're going to just have it on the Impact roster. I think the problem Moose faces right now is that with this partnership now that's going with Impact and of course with AEW, I can see them trying to do some tricky things to try and get people invested in the product, something that's really edgy in storytelling. I wouldn't be surprised if Kenny Omega is your next Impact World Champion. I just have a feeling that they are building towards Omega and Swan. But Swan is going to give a match to Moose, judging after this I Quit match that took place with him and Willie Mack, of course, at Genesis, which was a great match as well. For those who haven't seen it, definitely go and check it out. I do agree. Match of the year contender already. And we've had so many. We've had 1 week of 2021. I can think of a top 10 already for this entire year. It just shows the talent pool in the world of wrestling right now. But I think Moose needs to be in the world title picture. I think he should be the face of Impact Wrestling. I really, really do. But Moose struggles at the minute because I don't know where they fit him in, because unless he turns full on babyface to defend Impact Wrestling against Kenny Omega, I don't see how they do that match. But certainly would be a match that I would love to see as well. I do think that Moose right now is on a level where he shouldn't and can't be ignored. I think Moose has to be the guy at some point this year. Maybe he's the guy that takes the belt off Omega if Swan can't get it back off of him. I'm not sure. But certainly there's a lot of interesting twists and turns coming up with Hard to Kill coming next week. We'll certainly have a clearer direction of what it's going to lead with Kenny Omega in Impact Wrestling over the next course of the next few months, perhaps even the next year. So I'm excited to talk about that. The predictions video will be dropping in the week, looking to potentially drop that Wednesday. Definitely no later than Thursday, but Wednesday right now is the target date for that. Hard to Kill predictions will be coming out, and hopefully we can revisit sort of in a way of where hopefully the direction will go for Kenny Omega. But certainly, just to go back on to finish your question, no, Moose shouldn't be ignored anymore. Moose needs to get in that world title picture and needs, in my opinion, to become world champion. We just need to find a way to be able to book it at this current present moment in time. Straight into Joshua, next question now here on AskSCW. Who does the best brain buster besides Kyle O'Reilly, Kid Cash and Coco Beware? I've got two for you here today, and those two actually are my favourites of everybody that's ever done the brain buster. First one I'll mention in the runner-up spot is Austin Aries. I think that he definitely has delivered a great brain buster over the years, certainly in his Impact days. But my favourite is the Japanese buzzsaw, Yoshihiro Tajiri. Back in the ECW days, I literally thought that he annihilated people, that they were dropped on the head back in the day when he did that. He made it look so painful and executed so well. So for me, I look no further back to the 90s. I have to go with my boy Yoshihiro Tajiri, one of my favourites from the ECW days. Last question this week comes from Cherry Jerry. Who are some fictional wrestlers that you would like to see become an action figure? And I've included your YouTube video in there for you, so people please go and check out that from Cherry Jerry. He's got Jimmy King from the WCW Mattel there from the Ready to Rumble movie. I thought of two for you that I think could be quite fun. One does link to WCW, and that is actually Captain Insano. Of course, was from the Adam Sandler movie The Waterboy. So it was a fun little cameo they had in that movie, and yeah, why not? That would be quite a fun one. And probably for me as well, I'd have to go with Mickey Rourke's The Wrestler. For me, I think that's an epic movie. I really enjoyed it. Of course, that was built around WrestleMania 25 as well, with Chris Jericho facing the Legends. And of course, then Mickey Rourke actually getting in the action there briefly. I would like to see his character made into an action figure. I think that would be pretty cool to see. But that's all from me anyway this week. Thank you for watching AskSCW. As always, hope you've enjoyed the episode. Please let me know your thoughts of the episode in the comments below on any of the topics that have been discussed today. Look forward to interacting with you in the comments section. Make sure to check out Wrestling Customs 24/7 as well. Custom championship belts from all your favourite promotions, and they actually now send internationally as well. Not only do they do that, they've actually got Valentine's Day cards available for now. So you can go to the one you love and send them a card via Wrestling Customs 24/7. Maybe you can tell some that you love them as much as R-Truth loves the I-95 711 24/7 Championship. But yeah, go and follow them on social media. Check out their website, all on the page for you right about now. And coming up on the channel this week, you can look forward to 10 potential surprise entrants in the WWE Royal Rumble. We've got the Hard to Kill predictions as well for Impact Wrestling. And last but not least, finally, a little bit later than I promised, but it will be coming to you, 10 breakout stars from AEW to look out for in 2021. And of course, you can go check out all the videos that have been released in this past week as well. There's some great content there for you. And like I say, please like, share, subscribe, hit the notifications to all so you're always notified when a video is released as well. But that's all from me anyway. Thank you for watching. Have yourselves a good one. Thank you for watching as always. You've been watching AskSCW here on SCW on YouTube.com. Take care. Have yourselves a great day.